of the Holy, Blessed, and Undivided Trinity, one God, circle of love. Please be seated. Love is a many-splendored, many-faceted, mysterious, wonderful, sometimes ugly thing. Love can take us in many directions, and it can mean many things. I recently was on a Viking-type river cruise down the Rhine for 7 days, and they're wonderful, but beware. You'll have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the same people. You'll love them at first, and you'll come to hate them by the end. And if one of them gets sick, you all get sick. So by the time I got to London, I found myself in the emergency room at St. Thomas Hospital. It's right across from the Palace of Westminster, so I think it's where they take the Prime Minister when I really got great treatment. It was the best ER I've ever seen. But the first physician to examine me comes in and asks me all the obligatory questions, and one is, do you drink alcohol? And I said, yes. He said, how much? I said, 2 days a week, Thursday and Friday. I don't drink on Saturday night because I may have to talk to you. And but I'm waiting for how much, and I say, I love Scotch. And he said, who doesn't? I've been waiting for a doctor to say that to me all my life, right? So I get home and I have to go see my cardiologist, and she gives me the lecture. No more than one drink a day. No more. But I have on this T-shirt that says quarantini on it, and it has a big martini. And before she lets me go, she says, boy, that martini looks good. And I said, you see. Well, that's a very simple kind of love. But what do you love? What do you really love? What gives you pleasure and no pain? Is there such a thing? What do you love with the ease that Rebecca first displayed for Isaac? And that I first displayed for my wife, and thank goodness she had the same reaction. What in the very depths of your being do you love? What do you regard with unmitigated pleasure? The list gets smaller and smaller. What do you find easy? What rules or practices or duties give rest to your soul? What comes effortlessly? In these hard times, what has God planted at the very center of your being so that you love it without ceasing, no matter how that love has been crusted over by life and labor and necessity? And by our tendency to do things that we really hate because we think they're good for us, or we think they will help us get ahead, or that they will please other people, or will make them love us. And what things do you imagine that you love, but that your soul and your body is damaged by because you cling to them beyond reason? Often we call them addictions, but they can not just be drugs or alcohol. They can be addictions to people, to practices. I know exercise addicts. I am not one of them. And what are bad habits? They're just bad habits that bind you and squeeze the living life out of you. What do you really love, and what does it do for you? I found that if I do what I love with Christ's grace, I find the yoke easy. That my heart is brimful and running over, and that I find peace in my soul, but that is so, so rare. Permit me just to enumerate a few things I love effortlessly. And some of these may seem trite. Some may seem overly simple. Some may seem overly complex, but here goes. I just love surfing the internet. It gives me great pleasure. If my internet goes out, I am in pure hell. I've always loved computers. And I love survey research. I used to be a survey researcher by trade, public opinion research. I love forming questions and analyzing them and finding out what people think and why, as much as sometimes I'm disgusted by what they think. Being a native Southerner, I'm disgusted by a lot of it. I love books on tape. My current preoccupation being Tell No One, just a harrowing, harrowing story of the troubles in Belfast. It just wrenches your gut as this craziness of ethnic division, now mostly past, I'm glad to say, rips its way through lives, both Catholic and Protestant, for no really good reason. And I love Kindle books. My current slow bedtime reading being an account of a serial killer and a driven city planner, Daniel Burnham, during Chicago's 1893 World's Fair. It's called The Devil and the White City. Repeat with the Ferris wheel that won up the Eiffel Tower. And I love words, just love words. I love their history. I love the sounds of them. I love their origins. I love learning how to pronounce my physicians, most of whom are not native United States citizens. That Dr. Stosic is actually Dr. Stosic, and she's Serbian. That Dr. Engelstein is actually Dr. Engelstein, and she is German. She's the one with the martini. And that Dr. Chen is actually Hen, and she is Taiwanese. And that the doctor everyone calls Kahan is actually Khan, with the first H and the second A silent, she says. And I like to preach. Clearly, I'm not up here doing this because I dislike it. I love to lecture people. I love to pontificate. Just love serving on the boards of nonprofit institutions that do really good things for people. And I love my wife, as I said, just as effortlessly as Isaac loved Rebecca. And has continued over many, many years, some of them not always pleasant, because being in love that way isn't always pleasant. I've got a niece and nephew and their two kids coming to stay in our one-bedroom condominium, and that's not going to be pleasant. And I love opera, and I love symphony music. And I love to read the story of Jesus, just how he turns our world upside down for the sake of the last, lowest, least, and lost. These are the easy yokes. But of course, there's the other side of life, all those things we oughta, shoulda, woulda do, what St. Paul calls the hard yoke of the law. In Paul's word, that yoke includes all 613 rules. The law may be good in that it tells us what's right and wrong, but it does not enable Paul, at least, to do what is right and wrong, for we forever try to do the right and are so often do the wrong. Yet, for Paul and for me, only the love and grace of Jesus and other true loves can lead us into what's right. And yet my observant Jewish friends tell me Paul got it all wrong, for the doing of the work of the law is a constant joy for them. Paul has, I suspect, a compulsive personality, would you believe, and a pretty adolescent one. He reminds me of my adolescent self when my hormones were popping and my obsessions with all kinds of things were blooming. And I would say to my mother would say, son, you've just got to discipline yourself. You've just got to discipline yourself. And I said, Mother, I just can't control myself. That was particularly with her lecture on how to behave around females. But tell Paul or tell me, don't do this, and I become obsessed with doing it. We've all got a goodly portion of compulsiveness, at least I have, and avoidance. Terry only has to tell me her computer isn't working, and I've got to compulsively find a solution before I can sleep. Terry tells me to take out the recycle, and I can let it pile up for weeks. And we're forever entrapping ourselves in the law, not just the law that says, thou shalt not do this or thou shalt not do that. That thou shalt not lie or cheat or steal or amass wealth at the expense of the poor. That's a hard one. And thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, and thou shalt love thy enemy. And we imagine we're a Christian nation, right? That law tells us we're only as good as our, there are laws that tell us we're only as good as our body looks, augmented with plastic surgery and Botox and Wegovy and tummy tucks and facelifts. You got to look good. At some point, you got to give up looking good too. Yet the false law tells us what to avoid and what to do, and much of that may be good. It's just fine to look good and please God. And to have enough money to give 10% or more to the poor. Well, what the law cannot do is make us want to do what's right. So how do we develop that love? Sometimes it's spontaneous, as in the case of Rebecca and Isaac. Sometimes it's learned, as in the case of good habits. I just have to learn not to do certain things. I have to learn not to tell people, you know, your hair really looks awful today. Some of it is a matter of good habits. Some of it is a matter of developing sensitivity. Some of it is following the good examples of others. And some of it is in following the good example of Jesus. A story of a person who has, by his example, changed my life. I hope. His name is Mauricio Cifuentes. He's from Colombia. He's a social worker. It's not Colombia, Colombia. He's a social worker. He was professor at Loyola, and he can never keep a high-paying academic job because he always wants to be in a social agency in a poor neighborhood. So he's now at Cicero Family Service. And I had dinner with him last night. And he told me about his day I live in Oak Park, he lives in Lakeview. He told me about his day. He said his husband is the organist choir master at Grace Hinsdale, where I used to serve. And he told me they were going to meet in Oak Park, and he told me about getting to Oak Park on the L. He took the red line, and on the red line he discovered 2 Latinas with 4 children in carriages and 2 toddlers walking along the side of them who could not speak any English, and they were trying to get someplace. And he took them from the green line down at State and Lake, down to the red line, got them on the right train, came back up, got back on the green line, and when he gets to Oak Park, there's a woman in a wheelchair. And she needs help because she has to walk down a set of steps. So he takes her wheelchair and he walks down those steps with her. And when they get to the entrance, the guard said, "Oh, I'm so glad you found somebody to help you today." Now that's extraordinary love. It's love that is spontaneous for him. I'm sorry, it's not spontaneous for me. It's far easier for me to go, well, too bad. But having his example, which is a very Christ-like example, I am going to try to follow him. So this, I say, my friends, if you want to find out what true love is, find out what truly speaks to your true inner self? What is it that really makes you whole and into the child that God would have you be? And follow that. Ignatius Loyola says, in souls that are progressing to greater perfection, the action of the good angel, that is the good spirit within you, is delicate, gentle, delightful. But there is also an evil spirit always on my left side. If you're left-handed, I'm sure the good spirit is on your left side and the evil spirit is on your right side. But there is an evil spirit, and Loyola Ignatius writes, the action of the evil spirit upon the soul is violent, noisy, and disturbing. Today, of course, we'd call that an internal dialogue. But remember that one voice within us is leading to freedom and life, and the other leads to slavery and death. Let us look this day for the Spirit that leads us to life. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.